This video is going to walk you through patterns with fractions. Write a rule, find the unknown term. So I want you to see what I've started here. This was the problem: 1/8, 1/2, missing term, 1 1/4, 1 5/8. So here's what I'm doing. The very first step is going to be to rewrite each of these fractions so they have a same denominator or a common denominator. In this case, it's going to be 8 because 8, 2, and 4, the least common denominator for all three is 8. So what I did is I changed 1/8 to 1/8. It got to stay the same. It already had an 8. 1/2 I changed to 4/8 because 2 times 4 is 8. So 1 times 4 is 4. 1 1/4 is going to change as well to 1 2/8 because 4 times 2 gives me 8. So 1 times 2 gives me 2. So let's continue. Now 1 5/8 already has an 8 as a denominator, so we just bring it down. Okay, so that was step 1. Now that we have everything with a common denominator, we can move to step 2. And step 2 is to ask yourself, is my pattern increasing or decreasing? So when you look at it from left to right, you can see that the numbers are increasing. So that tells you that your rule is going to be to add. Now, we still need to figure out exactly how much we are adding, and to do that, we do step 3. So you're going to pick any two fractions that are right next to each other, and you are going to subtract them. So I could do these two, or I could do these two. But I could not do this one and this one because they are not right next to each other. So I'm going to keep it simple and go with these. So 4/8 is greater than 1/8, so I'm going to start there. So 4/8 minus 1/8 equals 3/8 because you only subtract the numerators. So that tells me that that's the difference between these two fractions. So to get from 1/8 to 4/8, they added 3/8. So we're going to go ahead and add that over here, 3/8. Okay, so now we found our rule. It is add 3/8. But we still need to find the unknown term. So to do that, you simply apply the rule. You now know the rule is add 3/8, so let's apply it. The last fraction before the missing term was 4/8. So you take 4/8 and you add 3/8. Again, only adding the numerators. 4 plus 3 is 7. So our missing term is 7/8. And that's number 1. All right, let's try one more like this. All right, so we've got some bigger numbers here, but we're still going to follow the same rules. We need to first find a common denominator for 3, 18, and 9, which is going to be 18. So everything's going to change. So we have 10 and something over 18. 3 times 6 is 18, so 2 times 6 is 12. This one already has an 18, so I'm just going to bring it down. This one's going to change to 8 and something over 18. 9 times 2 is 18, so 5 times 2 is 10. Here's our missing term. This one's going to change because it does not have an 18 as a denominator. 9 times 2 is 18, so 4 times 2 is 8. Okay, so there's step 1. We found a new equivalent fraction for each one with a common denominator. All right, so now step 2. Ask yourself when looking from left to right, are your numbers increasing or decreasing? And if you look at the whole numbers, you can clearly see that our numbers are decreasing. So that tells us that our rule is going to be to subtract. Okay, so we got to figure out what exactly we're subtracting. So rule, subtract something. And that's what we're going to figure out next. Okay, so to figure out exactly what you're subtracting, we need to, again, choose two of the fractions that are right next to each other and subtract them. Any two you want. You could do this one and this one. You could do this one and this one. Okay, so let's go with the first one. So we have 10 and 12/18 minus 9 and 11/18. All right, so we're going to subtract our numerators. 12 minus 11 is 1. Denominator stays 18. 10 minus 9 is 1. So that tells me the difference between these two fractions, is 1 and 1/18. So over here in our rule is subtract 1 and 1/18. So that's how you find your rule. But now we still need to find that missing term. So again, to find the missing term, you just apply the rule. So the fraction right before it was 8 and 5/9, and I need to subtract 1 and 1/18. But instead of using this one, because it has a different denominator, I'm going to use the one I've already converted to the common denominator. So we're going to take 8 and 10/18, and then we're going to subtract our rule. So we're going to subtract 1 and 1/18. 10 minus 1 is 9 over 18, and 8 minus 1 is 7. So that gives us 7 and 9/18, or 7 and 1/2. So our missing fraction here, 7 and a half, again, or you could write it 7 and 9/18. When you look at it in this term, you can clearly see 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Sometimes it'll be easy to figure out, sometimes it won't, but you can always use the strategy of choosing two next to each other and subtracting them, and then that completes your rule. Then use the rule to find your new term. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you guys is one more question. You might see one like this, where they ask you to write the first 4 terms. If you get a question like this, literally do exactly what it tells you. It says start at 5 3/4. So let's start at 5 3/4. That's going to be our first fraction. Okay, so now we have to subtract 5/8. So it's just like a repeated process. We're going to start with our 5 3/4, and we're going to subtract our 5/8. Now to do that, again, you're going to need a common denominator. So that's going to be 8. So this is going to change to 5 and something over 8. So 4 times 2 is 8. So 3 times 2 is 6 minus 5/8. Okay, 6/8 minus 5/8. 6 minus 5 is 1. So that's 1/8, and 5 minus nothing is 5. So 5 and 1/8 is our next term. Okay, then we just repeat. So take that 5 and 1/8 we just got, and again subtract your 5/8. Okay, so we have to regroup here because I can't do 1 minus 5. So this 5 is going to change to a 4. 8 plus 1 is 9. So 9 minus 5 is 4. And 4 minus nothing is 4. So our next term is 4 and 4/8. All right, one more to go. So again, take your 4 and 4/8, make a new problem. Subtract your rule of 5/8. And we're going to need to regroup again. You can't do 4 minus 5 here. So cross off your 4, it changes to a 3. 8 plus 4 is 12. So 12 is my new numerator. 12 minus 5 is 7 over 8. And 3 minus nothing is 3. So 3 and 7/8 is my final term in the pattern. So there you go. I hope that helped. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comments.